Stuart, hello.
Hello, Dave.
Good to see you.
I need to.
Thank you for giving your time so generously to
Nice. It's my pleasure.
have a little chat.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, how was Christmas?
Christmas was
You
uh,
all right?
was good. Actually, it's a quiet one by our standards, but it was very nice, relaxed.
There you go. The reason I ask you that is not just because I'm being genuine with asking you how your Christmas was, but because it's a time of year where I asked it. I run the group, as you know, for the youngsters, and Christmas, the first Christmas for families is tough. It's a tough one to navigate. This isn't your first Christmas though, is it?
No, in fact, actually, this is on Christmas Eve. It was our son Jack, who we'll get to
Yeah.
speak about in a moment. It was his second anniversary, so he's 2 years clean now.
Okay. Look, it makes sense. We did discuss this before I hit record, but it makes sense now we've just said this in the way we've said it. If anyone has already listened to Jack's story, if you haven't, or if you have, re-listen to it or go and find it. It's on the list under Jack. There's only one Jack there, and that's your son, right?
Here's the one. Yeah.
Okay, so he's got his version of events. You can go and listen to that. But Stuart here today with us is Jack's father. So it's his anniversary. He went into treatment. Say that again. He went in
Yeah,
on.
well, Christmas Eve was it's 2 years since he's been clean for 2 years
Okay,
on
right.
Christmas Eve. So yes, it was very memorable, and we spent Christmas with him. So yeah, so
Wow.
that was quite meaningful. But yes, he was in yeah, he spent time in the clinic in a
Yeah,
center.
that's that's a bit of a tricky time to land in recovery, if you want to call it recovery, from addictions and all the things that you're trying to, treat.
Yeah.
Like Christmas Eve.
Yes.
That's quite a
Yeah.
a challenging time.
Yeah.
It really is. I did it in the summer. I think equally that's quite hard in the summer because don't know, yeah. I don't know. Anyway, so it's not your first rodeo Christmas, and it's and it was a pleasant one.
It was a great one. Yeah. This.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm just trying to get the best out of this chat for anyone that finds this and listens to it. I feel like the best thing I can do is say, or ask you rather, as a father, did you preempt or ever in your life think you would become part of a situation that you found yourself in over the last 2 years or so? Because it's been longer than that, because
Oh
obviously
yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
pre the recovery part and treatment and clinic, there's a lot. I mean, how far back are we dating? Is this, I mean,
Actually, Jack's difficulties really came to the fore during the pandemic. He's now 23.
mhm.
So in the as we hit the pandemic and the lockdowns, all the rest of it, he was actually in school doing his A levels. So he was part, I think, of that lost generation. And you obviously, I'm sure Dave, you hear lots of stories about youngsters who went through that period. The isolation that went
Yeah,
with the lockdown and so on. And his A level year actually was the year when it wasn't practical for them to do exams. Obviously not just for A levels, but for GCSEs as well, I think. But so he was at a period when he should have been kind of working towards exams, and he didn't have to sit exams, and he was then awarded his A level results off the back of his the work that he'd done over the course of the 2 years of his A level studies and so on. And I think that was one of multiple contributing factors. I think he felt a bit of a fraud, a bit of there was a bit of imposter syndrome that came from that. He's the fifth of our five children, and obviously all his siblings went through, did the hard yards and kind of went through all that. So I think he felt that somehow he escaped that and
Yeah.
wasn't right. And as I say, that was a contributing factor. But back to the story, I think his the difficulties that he was having really came to the fore during that period because, of course, it was a horrible period for people having to be isolated, particularly for obviously I think it hit young people particularly hard.
And for everyone involved, obviously yourself being part of that, that whole time, because I remember this is uncharted waters. This is like no one had ever been through a similar situation to try and navigate,
Yeah,
I don't know what it was like back in the war when, what they did with the schooling. I've never really thought about that actually, what they actually did when, there's all hell broke loose
yeah,
in the Second World War. Do they go to school? Do they stay in the bunker? I don't know. But they certainly didn't have the technology back then to just sort of be able to have the luxury, if you can call it that. Maybe that's how Jack saw it. Is like, oh, well, I'm just cruising here. I'm on cruise control. I'm not really working for it. I'm just sitting at home in my pajamas.
yeah.
It's a very weird time, wasn't it?
Oh, really, really weird. Yeah, really weird. And yeah, and I think he suffered a lot from that. But I think that was just that was one of multiple contributing factors, I think, for him.
Mm.
And yes, he was unbeknown to us, he had a real problem with alcohol and drugs. And but his pattern was that he would use during the night.
Ah, okay.
So it wasn't really in evidence to us during the day. So literally after we'd all gone to bed, early hours of the morning, he'd be drinking and using stuff, and
I've just had an image of our White's lemonade. There are other lemonades you can drink, by the way. The secret lemonade drinker that tiptoes down the stairs in the middle of the
yeah,
night to open the fridge up. So, just to land on that though, in all seriousness, jokes aside, because I was a secret squirrel, and I think a lot of us, I say us, we are secret squirrels. That's how it begins. It's something that, there's some shame attached, guilt. It's secret. We're doing something that we know we shouldn't be doing,
yeah,
and we try and remain it a secret. So I just wanted to land on because you said unbeknownst to us.
yeah,
So any good parent, and I know you, Stuart, this is no different for you. You you bring your kids up in the best way possible that you know is right for them, and you just want the best for them. But because of our secret, cunningness that we somehow discover, I don't know where that comes from. Don't know where Jack's come from. Um, we're very good at just. Did you have any? You just had no inkling that this was going on. There was
we had
no.
no inkling that there was a real addiction problem. We knew that when he was at times when he was able to go out and see friends, that he would come home and he clearly had a drink, or sometimes he'd be high on marijuana or something. And
Mm,
but they were and we at the time we put it down to because there were times when he would come back to the house and bring friends with him, and that was fine. We were fine about that. But everyone else was, yeah, obviously they'd all had a drink down the pub, and they were all fine. But he had a much more extreme reaction, and so at the time we we assumed that he just had a kind of a low tolerance and it affected him. And actually, I think that there is a lot of truth in that. We now think there is a lot of truth in that. We do think that he has a low tolerance to all of the substances that he's taken,
yeah,
and they react. He reacts to them in a much more extreme way than most people.
yeah,
Even cigarettes and vapes. So after smoking a cigarette or or using a vape, we notice that he's clearly affected in a way that's just not typical of kind of what you associate with that kind of use.
yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
So at the time, as I say, he would come back and he'd be with friends, and he was very affected by whatever he'd taken, and others weren't nearly so much. And we put that down to the fact that he was just oversensitive to it. And as I say, I think there's certainly truth in that. But also, I think he was using other things. So you go down to, go down to the pub with friends, and then find someone to buy something from, and he'd be taking that as well. And so he was obviously affected by these other things. And we didn't piece that together. It's only with hindsight that we kind of realized that was, and he's obviously subsequently spoken to us about that, so we know that is the case, but we didn't realize it at the time. So we didn't think that he had a problem per se. It was only later, once the penny dropped,
Mm.
we kind of realized what was this use that he was having during the night, that
Can I
became
can,
obvious.
can I ask you, so around about the time that um, he's just recreationally experimenting in what all young people do, or most people, it's not uncommon for people just to go to the pub drinking or whatever, going to parties or just experimenting with drink and maybe smoking cigarettes. And now, we can say vaping as well, in modern day. But um, was there a point in that time of Jack's experimentation, being introduced to, social lubricants, if you want to call it that? Um, did you have any form of knowledge or education or awareness on anything to do with addictive patterns or cycles or anything, I don't know what the right word is, like
Yeah,
anything to do with that, this sort of the world that you find yourself in
yeah.
now.
No, it was for us. It was a bit of a baptism by fire. We didn't
Yeah,
really, we were never part of that scene, if that's the way to express it. When we were young, obviously it was happening around us, but
yeah.
but it wasn't really kind of our thing.
My
And
mum was
so
like that. Yeah,
yeah, and didn't really have. We weren't close to anyone that had those kind of addictive, that when those behaviors became addictive, we didn't really
yeah.
experience that firsthand. So but obviously subsequently kind of thought about it, and with the newfound knowledge and education that comes with having to support your child through all of this, we realize that on both sides of our family, my wife and I, we have family members who clearly had dependencies, and on particularly alcohol, um,
Yeah.
other things too in some cases. Um, but yeah, we were kind of oblivious, really. I think the archetypal thinking that an addict is someone who is inevitably just in a doorway in town with an empty bottle beside them. It's you just think those archetypes, don't you? And
Yeah, 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 yeah,
one does, I think, and without any broader real experience,
yeah.
what else do you how else do you relate to those kinds of things? So yeah, so it was for us, it was like, well, once it became apparent to us that there was an addiction problem here, the biggest challenge for us then was to try and source some advice and some information that from people that we trusted, to help us kind of navigate our way through that, because those are conversations we'd never had before. We'd never had associations with people who, as far as we knew.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and here's another twist, of course. Now this has happened to us, and we do speak about it with friends. Not with a megaphone, but with friends who we exchange stories with. Suddenly, all these stories come out of the woodwork,
Yeah.
and you find that actually it's much more prevalent
Oh, gotcha.
than you ever thought it was. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
through, people are presumably feel a sense of shame, and don't share those stories widely. And it takes a catalyst of someone being able to take the first step.
Mm,
Then, inevitably,
yeah.
if someone says to us, well, how is, certainly back, a few years ago, how are your children? And we say, well, you know, doing well. Jack has been having these challenges, and has had problems with
Mm,
addiction. Suddenly, things you never knew about, people
yeah.
you know quite well, and their families, suddenly stories come forward about
It's
them
just,
having similar kinds of experiences and challenges.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I love what you're saying, and it's. Do you think? Because culturally, I mean, demographically, I know now, and we'll talk about this in a bit about your involvement. Now you're in the solution, you're very active within the solution to help other people. Um, and it's been my own experience is that because you're working, it's not just with people predominantly in the UK where you're situated. I'm in the UK as well. Demographically, it's people dotted all over the world that I'm associated with and I've engaged with, and obviously it's a global thing. It's not just it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be in a certain area in the world to be affected. It's everywhere. But do you think culturally, the Brits, there's certain, I won't say who they are, but there's different cultures that are, they, excuse me, they react to this, what we're talking about in different ways. Some
Mm.
people just will not go there. They will not talk about it. Some cultures, they just cannot do it. There's too much on the line to talk about it,
Yeah.
even with professionals. Do you think we've improved as a country, as a nation, culturally, as a society, us Brits?
That's an interesting question, and I suppose I suppose for us it was as I said, going through the experiences with Jack, when it became apparent to us that he did have these
Mm.
problems with dependencies, um, then we were on a journey just kind of learning stuff, and as I say, during that journey, we realized that there was much more of this is much more of a wider problem than we ever thought was the case.
Mm.
And I don't mean the use of substances, but I mean dependency on them and
Yeah,
addiction issues. So and it is because, as you say, there is the stigma associated with it, and people generally don't talk about it. I don't know personally if it's not been my experience that
mm.
culturally, whether in other countries, other areas
Mm.
that whether people are more forthcoming and it is more part of the parliament. Certainly, obviously, I'm aware that other countries have different attitudes towards the use of
Yeah,
recreational drugs, for example, and I'm sure that has a part to play. But I think what we're talking about here is something different, is something quite different from that, and of
yeah,
course it's not just drugs or just alcohol. It's an addiction, a dependency on any particular thing, and which again is another thing that I've come to learn that it's
yeah,
they're just all variants of fundamentally the same thing. It's the same
yeah,
um, innate challenges that people have faced, and it may express itself through use of alcohol or use of drugs or gambling or,
yeah,
or whatever. So, yeah, I think perhaps the one thing that we have observed is different attitudes within the university system to the
mm.
use of drugs, particularly um, illegal substances. And Jack was studying at a university that basically we knew had a zero tolerance um, to drugs, and therefore it became very difficult in that setting to actually talk about it. So it's almost like the system was inhibiting, but
Yeah.
discouraging
It,
people from
yeah,
actually being open about the situation. And it's
yeah,
like they've just got their burying their head in the sand and thinking, well,
yeah,
if we don't, if we say it's not tolerated and we don't talk about it, then we won't have the problem, which of course is
yeah,
complete nonsense.
yeah.
And
Is
we
yeah.
we know that other universities have different attitudes
Mm.
and are more pragmatic and grounded and sensible and supportive, and it's certainly in some
Yeah.
cases, and that's been our particular experience too.
Yeah, it's great. Jack, I remember him talking about that. And now where he is, where he went to, he's the complete polar opposite of that disingenuous I mean, I could get into this, but I won't go too far into it because I'll just I'll go off on a tangent. But because I've done a lot of work in the education system, and it's all about what they look like. It's keeping up the
Yeah,
appearances and
yeah,
PR, and oh yes, come to our academy or our place or our school, our university, college, will yield excellent results, and we're the best at this and that. And it's like, well, yeah, great, but what does any of that count if you're not got your head in the right place? And you know, academics aside, where you at with that? Can you support the people that are there? Because in the world we live in today, um, your case is not alone. We've already said that. Once you open up the Pandora's box,
Yeah.
you see that there's a lot of people there all trying to map out and navigate the same space.
Yeah.
So I think it's about accountability, and it's great that there are places out there, and Jack's at one of them that
Yes.
really, really, really support it. And I've been to not that one, but I've been to the one where the blueprint from that one. I think it started out further north because that's in the Midlands, isn't it? And then there's one
Yes.
further north that I went to many years ago where they were talking about it being rolled out throughout the country
Mm.
as a standard, blueprint, which it should be. I don't know why
Yes.
it isn't. It's come on, people. Anyone listening who's on the board for education, sort it out, pull your socks up, get with the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and
uh,
and Jack was invited to actually attend a conference that was taking place in the US
yeah.
this year, where they do have these collegiate programs to
Mm,
support students in recovery, and it is a thing there. I'm sure it's not the case that all universities have this facility, but certainly quite a few of them do,
mm,
and and that's amazing because of course I'm sure that my guess, I don't know, but my guess is that those that kind of that period of your life, you're a student, you're young, you're in an environment where everyone's kind of doing this stuff recreationally.
yeah.
It must be a prime time when folks do fall into the kind of trap of becoming dependent on
Yeah.
substances, and therefore you would say that in those settings, that's exactly the kind of place you do want to be able, you do want to provide support so that you
Yeah.
can understand what people are going through and provide them with some guardrails and some help to kind of help to get them through that. So
Yeah.
so I think what Jack saw obviously in attending this conference was that there are plenty of places in the US that have these programs, yet hardly. Well, we know of one. We know of the one that Jack is attending, and
Mm.
you mentioned there may be another here, but it's clearly it doesn't feel very progressive, does it?
No, there's definitely two in the whole country.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're onto something here, and I feel like we need to. There's wheels in motion to feel like we need to go and knock on some doors, and
Yeah.
and we'll get into the what you do with the parents, the parent posse, if you want to call it that, the We Thrive community. We'll get into that. I just want to rewind a minute, right, before we go forward. So if you would be so kind, I don't want you to get too into it because we don't need to. But just so anyone listening, um, the lowest point of your journey, because you're clearly, I know you, Stuart, you're in a, you've really gone through a process what a lot of people have to try and endure. And you really are in the solution of it. You've got a network of people around you that you are linked into for your own journey, not Jack's, your
Yeah.
own, right? And that's really important. We can talk about that. But if we rewind to the start of that, before you had all of that,
Yeah.
right? Um, did you feel like you was on your own? I mean, obviously you've got your wife,
Yeah.
your partner, but did you feel the both of you? Did you feel quite alone with this, or did
Yeah.
you?
That's
Okay,
exactly how we felt.
right.
We felt like that there was no there's no instruction manual that you could just pick up that says, okay, you're in this situation, you're not the only one, here's what you need to do. it was, we just had to navigate our way through that. And as we said already, we hadn't particularly been part of any culture where there was, a high use of substance abuse and maybe addiction that went with it. So it wasn't like it was outside of our frame of reference. And the difficulty we had was in just finding just knowing where to turn. It's like, well, who do you speak to? Is this something you go to your GP about? Is it something that you go to, you just find a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or what do you do? And I think that was really difficult. And I was thinking about it. It's a bit like, I don't know if you're a parent, Dave, but obviously we've got five, and remember back to our first child, and of course you have your first child, and of course you're full of good intentions, and you've probably read the books and spoken to people, but then problems arise, and they be problems like your child's got the baby's got their first cough, or has got an infection, or has got colic, or you just encounter things, or your wife is having problems breastfeeding, or whatever. These things that obviously humankind has encountered forever. It's like there's a wealth of inbuilt knowledge and experience on that. Yet whoever every person you speak to has got a different opinion. And that was when we had our first child, and we were sort of navigating through that, and there are a couple of occasions when our first child was born early and was very small, and so there were some things that were sort of related to that we were having to encounter. But as I say, we spoke to different people had different advice, and you kind of they're thinking, well, whose advice should you take? Your natural thinking is, well, why don't you take the advice of professionals, because surely they know best. But again, you get this diversity of opinion from different professionals, different midwives who will tell you something completely different. And of course, when you're going through this, and it's at the time it's the most important thing in your life, it's very distressing to have this conflicting information, and this fear of following the wrong advice and making a mistake. So obviously, dealing with raising a child is something that many people encounter, and so the difficulty with something like dealing with addiction in your child is even more challenging than that, because of course it isn't, as we said, it isn't something that people freely speak about. It's not something that you can just typically, that there are books published on it in the same way, and people don't want to talk about it. So it's like, so where do you get your advice? And we, navigating that journey, we just found profoundly difficult and challenging. And we went to professionals. One of the things that came to life, we saw a psychologist who thought that Jack probably had ADD, and subsequently he was diagnosed with ADD. So that was sort of a contributing factor, for sure. We saw in order to get a diagnosis, so at the time we told, well, the best thing then you can do is to have Jack medicated for his ADD, because then if he's got that under control, then he's less likely to be impulsive, because that's an associated factor with ADD. And of course the impulsiveness is one of the things that can be a contributing factor in substance use and all the rest of it. So this particular line of advice was, get him a diagnosis of ADD, get him on some medication for it, and hopefully things will sort themselves out. That was a great hope. So we had to see a psychiatrist then, because to get an ADD diagnosis, to get the medication, you've got to have an official diagnosis. Went to the GP. The waiting list is eons, so we found someone we could pay privately to do this, and through that, the advice was that we should support Jack through a psychologist, and so we were recommended someone. This is someone who did private work, but also worked in the NHS, and so Jack went to see this person for a few sessions, and then contacted after a few seconds and said, In fact, I think at the beginning she said, "Well, I'd like to do a few sessions with Jack, and then we should have a family meeting. The two of you, me and Jack, will get together and sort of review where I think we're at and perhaps what the next steps are." So we turned up for this sort of review meeting with Jack to see this psychologist who,
Because that all sounds, just to interrupt, that all sounds really encouraging to me. That sounds really encouraging.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
It sounds like, there are professionals involved. They've got
yeah,
experience. You're on a journey.
yeah.
You're in a stepwise pattern to hopefully get some kind of resolution and some plan and
Mhm.
be on your way. And this psychologist sat us down and she said, well, what I want to tell you is that I don't think Jack has a problem. I think Jack is a recreational drug user, and you should know that practically everybody who is Jack's age will be using substances of the substances that he's using, and will be using in the way that he's using. So you need to cool your jets. This is, you're overreacting. And also, she said, I believe you're denying Jack some of his civil liberties.
I didn't know this part of the story. I'm
So
sorry to laugh. I'm not laughing at your misery. I'm laughing at the ludicrousy
the
of it all.
ludicrousness of it. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and we said, what on earth do you mean? And she said, well, apparently you've locked Jack's windows and taken away the keys so he can't open his bedroom windows. And we said, yes, we have done that. And she said, well, that's taken away his liberties. And we said, the reason we did that was because when under the influence of alcohol, he was climbing out of his window, and outside his window is the glass roof of a conservatory. And he was sitting on a glass roof of a conservatory at a 30-degree incline, in the middle of the night, in the freezing cold weather, putting his life at risk.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and it just seemed like, this person had kind of listened to Jack, thought, and of course, Jack is very eloquent and very charming and
Yes,
very
yes.
persuasive, and he told the story, and it seemed plausible, and
Yeah.
the coaches have gone along with that, and at that, I think that was the point at which we were just then totally in despair. It's like, okay,
Mm,
as you said, it seemed like we were on a journey, we were going in the right direction, we were getting professional advice from people who knew what they were talking about, and then suddenly it's like the bubble burst, because this person we've been obviously privately paying for these sessions clearly did not have a grasp of the situation at all,
oh
because
dear.
we knew that Jack did have a problem, that
Yeah.
he was a danger to himself, and there have been we may or may not have, it'd be appropriate to talk about it, but there were subsequently, multiple occasions when he put his life, not only his own life but the lives of
Yeah.
others, in danger
We
as a
we don't
consequence.
yeah, we don't need to get into nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts, but I go and you can listen to Jack's episode. I'm not sure, I can't remember where he goes with it, but I'm sure there's enough in there to get a real sort of sense of the gravity of the situation. I can definitely vouch for that, and you've got your own version of that. We're just touching the surface. What I think is questionable is yeah, it is what it is, man. I mean, it's not a standalone sort of case scenario that you're describing. I've heard this countless times. You're not the first, you won't be the last. It's a lottery. Who you see professionally, air quotes, um, it's a lottery. It really is. I feel that some people get it right and some people are way off the mark, and you've just got to navigate it. And when you're already in this sort of roller coaster, white knuckle, seat your pants ride, you kind of need people who are conspiring to help you. You really need that support. You need people that really understand the gravity of the situation, and not all of them get it right.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, Jack's charming, and he might have sat there and painted a different picture, but if you've got that intuition, if you've got the knowledge, if you've got your own experience of knowing, really, you see through that. And that's the difference between someone that gets it right and someone that doesn't, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, continue. So that's kind of like where you're at. You're trying to find like the way out of this, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to find someone who's who, yeah, as you put it there, who just kind of gets it, understands the situation,
Yeah.
realizes the gravity of it, and can give some sound and sensible advice on
Mm.
how we take it. And I think that was probably the point at which we met you, Dave. Um, and I can't remember. I don't know whether you can, but I can't remember what the link was. But
I'm vague. Honestly, I said this to Jack. I'm really vague on it all. This is what year was it? How long ago was this?
um, this was probably about 4 years ago.
So we're in COVID. It's COVID times.
Yeah, it's COVID. It's COVID times. That's right. Kind of coming to the end of that now. I think so because what happened was that so as I said, he didn't take his exams at A levels, and then he had planned to take a year off uni,
Hmm.
but because it was COVID times. And he was going to take a year off with a couple of his mates. They were going to do some traveling and then defer their entry by a year. So they all applied for a deferred entry.
Hmm.
And then of course COVID was happening, and they all thought, well, this is a crazy time to take a year out because we're not going to be able to travel anywhere, so that would just be a dead year. So they all went back to the university. So there's any chance we could actually not defer and start, that year. And his two friends, their university said, yeah, that's fine. But for Jack, they kind of strung him along. They didn't really give him an answer until like the 11th hour, so he didn't know whether he was going to uni or not that year. And then they said, "Oh, sorry, we can't accommodate you. We've got too many students. So you'll have to come when we originally agreed you would come, which would be
Hmm.
after a year's gap." So he sort of, although it was originally his choice to take a year out, it ended up being almost like an enforced year out because he actually did want to go to uni, and his friends had all gone to uni that year. So he was kind of again grounded at home for an extra year, um, during which there were lockdowns and stuff in that period. And he, and it was during that year that some of these problems started to arise. But he did then eventually go to university, and he got through his first year at university. But then I don't know how he got through that year, but he did manage to get through it. But things really went haywire then when he returned for his second year at university. He sort of spectacularly crashed out after a few weeks, and um, and then in the period after then, he that was the period. I think that was probably the period when we were introduced to you, and you helped to advise him that going to a treatment center was the best thing for him, and that's what he did. Um, and then he had a couple of lapses subsequently. So in fact, after that year, having taken that gap from uni and gone to a treatment center, he wanted to go straight back to uni again. We thought that's probably not a good idea. You should probably just take another
Mm.
year out to just get yourself in a good place. But he wanted to go back, and so he went back to start his second year for the second time at the same university, and crashed out of that truly spectacularly in under 24 hours. We were called by the university staff to say you need to come and collect Jack because we've just found him wandering around the centre of town in his dressing gown and slippers, high and a danger to himself and to others and so on. Um, so anyway, it was somewhere in that journey. I think at the point when we were trying to figure out what to do, somehow we got an introduction to you, and we spoke to you, and you spoke to Jack, and your advice was that you think that he should go to a treatment centre, and we
Yeah,
did that.
based on the evidence, it was undeniable. The evidence was stacked. It was like, yeah, I 100% could identify with one call. That this is what I think, and I'm not a, I'm no professional or specialist, or maybe I am, but I'm not qualified in the ways that a lot of professionals and specialists are, you know.
Mm.
As you know, and that's one thing I laid out to you straight away, and I think that's invaluable because I saw exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Um, and so do you feel like that was the start of everything? Do you feel like that was the first point where it was like, right, okay, not talking to me, but once what happened after that, you know, do you feel like that started to get some traction?
Yeah, I think, well, we definitely think that going to a treatment center was the right thing for Jack, and it made a big impression on him and on us as well, because obviously you're part of the journey
Mm,
and the things we learned through that, and as a consequence of all the counselling and the therapy that he had whilst he was there, and
yeah.
a lot of which was shared with us. It wasn't the end of the story. It didn't like come out of the treatment center and then we were all,
It's
all is
really,
fine.
really important point. So anyone listening, you know, and if you're trying to figure out a way out of your situation, whether you're a parent or whoever, very, very significant point what you just said there. It's not like a quick thing. It's not like, oh, just send them off and you know, everything's great. That's just the beginning. There's
Mhm.
work to do
Oh yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah, I kind of, and lifelong work, I would probably say.
Did you think though at the time, did you think it was just going to be a, you know, a quick thing of like, you know, just get them off and I mean, you would have had every reason to maybe hope for that.
Yeah, and of course, I think, of course, you hope for that, but I think we had enough people telling us and had heard enough stories to know that it's it's not necessarily the quick fix that it
Yeah.
might be. I mean, we do know instances where young people have gone through a treatment center and and then have been fine subsequently and have stayed
Mm,
clean. But I think in our empirical, the empirical evidence we have would suggest that that's it's more likely that there will be further bumps in the road.
mm,
But it is a journey,
yeah.
and I think you just have to
Mm.
understand that it's something that takes time, and it's there are multiple factors, and
Yeah. It's from my experience, and I've got a lot of it working in this realm, is I think the key to it is for everyone to gain a sense of support, not just the person that needs the treatment, but the entire, you know, dynamic that surrounds that, you know, be it the family or whoever, the caregivers or the significant others, you know, everyone needs to, it's a team game.
yes,
It really is. And everyone's got a role to play to make it a healthy dynamic and a healthy recovery. And I think if you have that in place and if everyone's really aware of this is what we need to do, it's a lifestyle change now. We all need to, you know, change our lifestyles a little bit to adjust to the situation we found ourselves in. Then there's no pressure just on one person to make it work. Not for the parent, not for the person that's got to do the treatment, you know.
yeah, yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think obviously the difficulty for particularly young people who are kind of going through this, and if they're fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go through
Mm.
a treatment and to be helped along that journey and understand kind of what is happening to them and the reasons for it and and the triggers and coping strategies and how to deal with that going forward, then I think that sort of that ecosystem in which they've lived up until that point. Um, it's obviously it's crucial that there is continuing support, and as you say, it's a team effort. But again, realistically, you have to recognise that particularly amongst friendship groups, there will be people there who they definitely shouldn't associate with going forward. If there are people with whom they've been
Yeah.
using
Mm.
and associate that those behaviours with the people, then they should deliberately choose not to be kind of
Yeah.
part of the future. There's also another group that I think is probably just kind of a bit oblivious, maybe, and doesn't, people who perhaps don't really recognize or are sensitive to the circumstances that they're going through. Just think, well, it's Jack, we've always worked with Jack this way, so we'll just carry on working with that. So, the people who are like to say, one drink wouldn't hurt, would it? Kind of, those kind of people who, probably with the best intentions, but
Yeah.
but probably just not the right kind of people to support them because they're going to enable the very
Yeah.
behaviors that you're trying to kind of rid yourself of.
So I'm going to share this, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. It's just relevant. It's really important what it's saying. So it's like the way I see it is you really have to understand what you're working with. And I heard a situation that happened and played out over Christmas, and this is a classic one of a young maverick, as I call him. A young maverick who's now in recovery. First Christmas, their first Christmas, trying to navigate Christmas. And they've chosen to dedicate their life to being sober, no drink, right? Which is hard for a young person. Very, very hard, as you know. And I'm not going to say who it was, but someone within that ecosystem, that's in their ecosystem, within their inner circle, said, if it helps you, I'll do sober Christmas too, just to help you, to support you. And they were like, wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Christmas Day, blind drunk. Didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it really, really triggered them. It really offset everything about their belief of like other people supporting them. It triggered them in the sense that they're trying to be sober and then they're starting to compare, the comparison thing of, the fit FOMO thing kicks in of like, oh, questioning, should I be sober? Is it worth it? Should I just like, press the the fuck it button? All of that stuff. And so that's a very sort of it's a very real thing, that plays out is this is what I feel we have to understand, do you feel that what I'm saying, I know you, Stuart, you've been hugely supportive in Jack's journey. And just because other people don't take that accountability, it's not because they don't care. Maybe
Yeah.
there's some work for them to do as well. Maybe I don't know, but you was definitely at a place, you and your partner, where you were in this. You knew exactly what was involved, and you knew exactly what was needed because you had the right guidance and support around you
Yeah.
and the education.
Yeah. No, yeah, I totally um what you're describing there kind of resonates,
Mm.
friends of Jack's who've not necessarily, well, yeah, I think probably have done things like that and said, well, let's get together for weekend and we don't need to drink, we don't need to drink, and then it's like, why don't we just go down the pub? It's you know. But going back to what you were saying earlier about that, it's a team effort.
Mm.
Um, so here's, I think, Jack is really fortunate in that his four siblings have been incredibly supportive and understanding, and have been there for him. And I know that he kind of relies on them a lot and calls on them, and he'll pick up the phone to them if he's
Yeah,
having a tough time and so on, which is amazing. And I think that's been, for him, that's been part of that core, that inner circle that has
yeah,
provided with that, that continuity and constancy and support. And I feel, when as part of these support groups and chatting with other dads, mainly, I really feel for those situations where, because of what's happened and the consequences of that behavior of that person who's got these dependencies, it has kind of almost irretrievably broken down relationships with siblings and other family members, that then makes that ongoing journey really challenging to navigate, because they're the people you really want to be there,
yeah,
at least if not necessarily to be your best mate, but to be
yeah.
be that kind of constancy and that
Mm.
and provide that continuity,
Definitely,
reliability.
definitely. It makes a big difference. It really does. So do you feel the the process that Jack went through, because it is a lottery, it really is. There's no guarantees. You could send someone somewhere, and if you find yourself in life with the means, the resources to be able to help someone, a son get to somewhere like that, it's a blessing, and but there's no guarantees. When he returned. Had you already? I don't know if We Thrive. For anyone listening, I'm going to leave a link in the description to We Thrive because it's a brilliant non-profit organisation that's set up by parents, and you're involved in that. And it's a support. It's like a parent peer-led support group for
Yeah.
parents that are in a similar situation to the one you found yourself in. It's absolutely brilliant. Um, was that set up? Was that already in place when you started to get the?
We when Jack came out of the treatment center, someone had mentioned it to us because I think those parents there were four sets of parents who formed that group.
Mm,
I think they had met through that same treatment center, so it wasn't particularly
yeah,
linked to that treatment center, but it was sort of that had been the catalyst. And I think having gone through the same treatment center, we kind of got to hear about it and made
yeah,
contact and yeah, and found it incredibly supportive. And it's it's one of the things that had we I'm not sure the timing of when it was actually founded, but it's if it's exactly the kind of thing that we wish that we had had from day one, because
yeah,
speaking with parents who've gone through exactly the same thing that we're going through, who can tell you about, okay, well, this is what we tried and what worked and what didn't work, and these are the people we
yeah,
spoke to who were helpful and these were unhelpful, and these are the even the disciplines, even these are the professional disciplines that actually were helpful, and
yeah,
understanding the ADD or ADHD kind of dynamic and how that kind of fits. All those things would have just been so incredibly helpful and helped us to kind of shortcut that journey to identify people who we should have been speaking to from the beginning to help us.
yeah. It's a vital resource, and it's there. And like I say, I'll put a link in. And so, your involvement with that, are you just a participant, or do
Yeah, I'm
you?
just
Yeah.
yeah, don't take any credit for it whatsoever. But We Thrive runs has there are weekly meetings, and
Mm,
they are it's anyone is invited, as you say. It's a not for profit, and there will be a facilitator, and it's there for parents who have gone through this particular of young people typically, just to help them, just to provide them support, help them with suggestions, guidance, contacts, whatever. So there is a weekly group which is for anyone, and then there's a bi-weekly men's group
mm,
meeting. So what they found was that that actually that group for everyone what tended to be attended by women, mothers in the
yeah,
main, and not many men were attending. So they then set up this separate meeting for
yeah,
men, and that's the one I attend. My wife attends the general meeting, so she most weeks she'll sit on that, and I'll sit on whenever I can on the men's group meeting. So yeah, I'm just a participant, but
it's,
it's great to just be able to tell your own stories to people who are kind of going through someone, to help them maybe draw parallels and think about things maybe.
God, yeah, yeah. It's vital. I mean, it's really is. It's what saved my life was someone telling their experience of how they were like, yeah, I really understand where you're at, but this is where I am now, and this is where you can be at, and I'll help you get there. Let's do this together. It's a
Yeah,
support. It's a support thing. There's a lot of power in the we. So yeah, we thrive. So
yeah,
clues in the name, people. Um, so yeah, I'll put a link in, and then anyone that's listening, if they find themselves in distress or need some support, reach out. So it's been vital in your own recovery, your own support.
yeah. For ourselves, it's been incredibly. Um, I think that aspect to addiction, addiction is, seems to me is generally motivated by a somewhat selfish,
Mm,
it's an individual thing,
yeah.
yet it has repercussions on
Mm,
so many other people.
yeah.
In our family group, parents, four other siblings, plus with partners and now children. So we have grandchildren now.
Yeah.
That these are repercussions, and then of course then friendship groups and all the rest of it. So um, it's that there is a real need to provide support to those others. And of
Mm,
course, there is, there is Al-Anon,
hmm.
which is a similar kind of thing,
Yeah.
more generally and particularly in relation to alcohol abuse, I guess. But
Yeah.
which we haven't actually had experience of because we came across this thing first, and it is because it is very much focused around younger people going through these challenges
Yeah.
that it just seemed to kind of fit the bill. But those challenges that I alluded to earlier, those challenges are very wide ranging. It
Gotcha.
isn't
Yeah.
just alcohol and
Yeah.
and other substance abuse, but it could be self-harming,
Yeah.
eating
Yeah.
disorders, so on.
Any behavior that causes problems, basically, you
Indeed, yeah.
know. It's interesting touching on the dad thing, landing on that about you said that, observations are that not many dads were attending the group. So you've done your own sort of, there's a separate group for the dads. When I used to, I still do some talks now and again in schools, but when I used to be in schools a lot, I used to now and again do parents' evenings. We used to do talks. So we'd go in and engage with the students, and then we'd do parent evenings. So we'd want to engage with parents, and
Mhm.
might have a guest speaker. I might be one of those guest speakers that would go in and share my life story to a bunch of unsuspecting parents. But they'd be told, "Oh, we've got some guest speakers coming in to talk about, the perils of alcohol and drugs and all the other stuff that could be a problem." And yeah, it was pretty evident that not many dads turned up to those either. It's not really a thing. Again, getting back to the cultural thing, I don't know if there's any country out there where it'd be the other way around. It'd be like, yeah, there's not many mums that go. It's only dads. Do you think it's I mean, I'm a guy, you're a guy. Do you think unless we learn how to talk about stuff, do you think it's something that we just don't talk about? We've never really been taught to talk about it.
I think it's that, yeah. I think,
Yeah.
well, I'm sure there are multiple factors, but I do think that that is a big part of it. That it's, and in fact, this was one of the things, when Jack was going through therapy, and in this clinic has a 10-week program, the one that he went to, and the 5 week point. So there's a sort of like there's no contact during the 10 weeks, apart from at the halfway point when the parents are invited to attend the clinic, and it's a very carefully kind of choreographed sort of interaction and sharing of kind of views and experiences and so on. And in that, one of the things that out of that process, which also included some family therapy,
Mm,
which didn't include Jack, so that was just for myself and my wife. That one of the things that just became really clear to me was that I don't naturally share stuff. I don't naturally speak about myself, and particularly how I'm feeling. I feel about things. So Jake does this thing with me where he'll say, you know, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about such and such? And I'll say, well, I'm looking forward to being able to do such and such. He said, no, Dad, how are you feeling about it? And it's like there's something about that. I'm just not, I've not been trained to do it. And then of course, through that family therapy,
yeah.
it prompted me to just reflect on how my parents were with me, and that's, that was, there was no modeling of that behavior. My parents
Yeah.
didn't do that either. I wasn't
Yeah.
encouraged to speak about that. It just wasn't part of the parlance or the dialogue, and so I don't naturally do it.
Mm.
But that's my personal experience. But I think generally and culturally, particularly in this country, I
Yeah.
think, blokes generally aren't encouraged to do that. I think what I find quite fascinating though, so I did attend I've attended a couple of the wider group meetings for We Thrive when we first learned about them, and I think that was actually before they'd set up the separate men's group, and I think my personal experience is that the mothers tended to want, they were there up front, had stories to tell, wanted to engage, and it just became a very a dialogue, even though there may be other men on, well, I was there and there may have been one other guy, but it was a dialogue between women. That seemed just how it naturally
Yeah.
evolved. And so I attended a couple, and then I kind of stopped going, and then a short while after that, they said, "Oh, we're starting up this men's group." So I joined that. But what I found quite fascinating about the men's group is um, that actually, everyone who's attended, and maybe it's a self-selecting thing. Maybe you don't, you don't turn up if you're not prepared to actually disclose and share. But as I've said already, not my natural mo. But nonetheless, I turned up, and what's fascinating is the fact that all of the guys who've attended, have done many of those meetings now. Everyone is very forthcoming and
Mm.
prepared to share and to kind of open up. And I guess there is something about that vulnerability that
Yeah.
as you were saying earlier, we're all in this together. It's all, we're all part of the same club, basically.
Yeah.
We're going through the same thing. We've got, and it's all done on a nothing, we don't share these stories outside of this.
Yeah. It's
um,
a very discreet space. It's very, yeah.
yeah,
What you say and what you hear it stays there. Yeah.
exactly. So it feels safe. It not only feels safe, but it's well, it is safe, but
Mm.
it just, people feel just comfortable telling the stories and relating to one another and their experiences, and it's really helpful. There's nothing like that I do or have ever done before,
Yeah.
but it is incredibly helpful and supportive and
Yeah. And
insightful.
uh, and no one's sitting there having a beer, like smoking a cigar, doing
Exactly.
doing it. They're like everyone's very present and very, it's a
Yeah.
very gentle, safe
Yeah.
environment. It's an online space. It's online, isn't it? So everyone's just,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's very discreet. Um, what's come up for me there, what you're describing is if you go back into that week 5, halfway through the treatment, and you said the way they orchestrate, they coordinate the coming together after 5 weeks of not seeing Jack, and you and your partner came back into the space
Yeah.
to sit with counselors and therapists, etc.
Yeah.
And you have to feel, it's for me, it's about trust. And of course, going into that sort of environment and in that situation, if you're not really well versed in that, I mean, Jack had already had 5 weeks of it, so he was really well primed to be able to sort of sit there. But then you and your partner are going into it with not that training, if you want to call it training,
Yeah.
So it must have been a confrontational kind of situation. It must have been to go into that. Do you feel? I don't know if confrontational is the right word, but
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say confrontational, but I would definitely say, I think we were all very apprehensive about it
yeah,
because you don't quite know how it's going to play out.
even Jack, no
Even
doubt. I mean, he's been primed. He probably feels like this team's on my side. you know, I've got them in my corner. But it's not done like that. It's an inclusive,
yeah,
it's a very coordinated, skilled, um,
yeah,
yeah, it's a well played out scenario. It has
it
to be.
is. It is absolutely it is, and it's incredibly powerful.
Mm,
I mean, you're asked to prepare certain things ahead of time, so you've thought these things through and what you're going
mm,
to say, and and part of it is about thinking about what is your red line. What are your red lines? What basically is, what's acceptable to you and what isn't. and
non-negotiables, basically.
non-negotiables. Yeah,
You're not going to manipulate this one, Jack.
that's right. That's right. And of course that is really it's really tough to do because obviously, saying that saying to your son or daughter, if you do that again, then you know you can't live in this house, or
There's a
you,
consequence. Yeah,
or,
there's
or
a
yeah, or
consequence.
we're not funding your accommodation
Yeah,
anymore. Whatever it is, that there are consequences. But what you know, of course, is that those consequences could lead, if they played out, could lead to quite dire situations. So if you say, for example, okay, you can't use drugs in our house, and
fair,
if you
fair
do,
enough. Fair enough. Yeah,
yeah, and if you do, then you're not welcome to live here, and you'll have to move out. But
mm,
obviously, if that person hasn't got any source of income, what are they going to do at that point? Where
yeah,
are they going to live? They're going to
yeah,
find a hostel. They're going to sleep in a doorway. It's like so. It's quite a it's an incredibly emotive thing to do, and again, in the men's group, it's something that comes up, and people talk about how they've navigated their way through that, and
yeah,
it's situations where those red lines have been crossed, and how they've had to deal with that.
yeah.
That's such an incredibly difficult, challenging part of.
Yeah, and not one that any parent would wish to find themselves in, And when you do, it's far easier to do it with people helping you with some
Yeah,
experience who have been through a similar thing. So I
yeah,
think from the moment you land in that family therapy situation, right through to aftercare and beyond, the integrating back into life, going forward. I feel like it's really important, it's really integral to have some sort of program that you can work, some sort of blueprint that you can work to.
mm,
That's been my experience of my own journey, actually, is, I know Jack needs a program. I need a program. I
mm,
feel like families need a program,
yeah,
and if everyone's got a program, and you don't necessarily need to have the same program, but the fundamentals, the principles, the core principles kind of need to be on the same page.
yes,
Morally, they've
yeah,
got to have some truth to them, and I think everyone's truth is going to be different, but I mean it's fairly obvious unless you've lived in a cave for hundreds of years to what those might be.
yeah,
um, that are non-negotiable, like honesty. We need honesty now. We need to build trust because that's a big one, right? Trust.
absolutely, yeah,
Do you feel you've got that back?
yes, yeah, yeah.
That's an immediate yes.
No, no, I
Yeah.
I definitely do. I think, yeah, I think Jack is now in a very good place. I think he still has challenges, of course, and situations that are difficult for him to navigate. So, for example, he is, as I've said, he is now doing for the third time. He's doing his well, sorry, he did he basically went into his second year for the third time, but at a different university, as I mentioned. He completed that, and he's now in his final year. So he'll wrap up his university education in a few months from now. And he is in a supportive environment,
Mm.
but he is on campus in a university that is full of students who do the things that students do. And you when we go and visit him, we walk down beside his the student accommodation, and as the usual things, there are windows where people have stacked beer cans, and it's like the culture is it's just like endemic. It's there's no
Yeah.
escape from it, and I think it's incredibly impressive that Jack has been able to kind of get through that. But he's done it. You were saying about that program. He's done that by he understands that for him he needs to have a program. He needs to have structure and routine, and he's
Yeah.
and he's designed that for himself, and he lives by that, and he's
Yeah.
he's very good at doing all the else, spending the time on the study, spending the time on the self-care and so on. And but for him that has meant, whilst being at university, basically not putting himself in situations that could be challenging. But that rules most things out, that's really tough. So he's done incredibly well, and it's to say, yeah, I mean, we do genuinely feel incredibly proud of him. But
Yeah.
it's about one of the questions you asked me earlier. If you, before all of this, could you ever have imagined that you would be dealing with the situation? Could I ever imagine that one day I'd be saying, I'm really proud of Jack because he's not, you know, drinking himself to oblivion and taking drugs that put his life at risk. It's it's like you have to kind of reset some of these parameters as you get through
Yeah.
this. But I do, to your question, yeah, I do absolutely think that Jack is in a great place, and he's done a lot of work, and we continue to support him, obviously, and he has support of others as well.
Mm.
And he's very good at recognizing, I think, when he's in a situation that's challenging for him, but he will do things. He'll pick up the phone, he'll call one of his siblings, or he'll call us, or call his girlfriend, or he'll
Yeah.
you know continue with those safe, to pursue those safe environments for him that are giving that comfort and the support that he needs to
Yeah.
kind of get through.
It's amazing. I think from what I got from listening to you, because obviously I'm listening objectively, but I'm obviously subjective to it as well, if that makes sense. Um, if I was listening as someone that just found this and I'm listening to what you're saying, I think what I would take away from it would be that things that are jumping out to me is there's safety in numbers.
Yeah,
It's like you on your own is one outcome. You with the right people, like-minded people who have some experience, has a different outcome, and that's evident with what you're sharing and
yeah,
what the evidence presents. So I think that's how I got out of my dysfunction, if that's what you can call it, my delusion, my madness, if you want to call it that. That's how I got out of it, was to just um, suddenly engage with someone that actually had a shared story,
yeah,
a similar story. That I was like, oh right, okay. I feel like that's the beginning of the bond of trust. Um, some people use the term trauma bonding. I'm not sure that's a good term. It sounds a bit murky, but it kind of is what it is. It's like, when it's when someone connects to a story that really resonates with
yeah,
your own. And I think there's something really profound that can come out of that, as long as you are heading in the right direction towards the light
yeah,
and out of the darkness. Because a trauma bond can keep you stuck in the darkness if you
yeah,
don't head towards the light. So I think you started to head towards the light, and you're still very much in that space. I know you are.
yeah.
It's a really beautiful journey,
Mm.
a day at a time, right?
A day at a time. A day at a time. Yeah.
All right, I think we've got a lot. I feel like I just want to ask you though one last thing. To anyone that does find this, who is in the darkness still, what would because you've got a lot of insight, Stuart. You've got a lot of insight. You've got some experience. You've got knowledge. You know, you've had a crash course education. Inadvertently, you found yourself having to do that.
Yeah.
Did you read a lot of books? Did you read a lot of
Yeah.
books?
Oh yeah.
Watch films, documentaries, YouTube? I bet you went on down the rabbit holes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you got any pearls of wisdom that you can offer up? I know you have.
Do you mean to parents of
Yeah, to anyone. I mean, anyone that
anyone?
finds themselves in the darkness that feels they've got no light, just give them a little bit of sense of there is some hope, man.
Yeah. Well, I think that a few things, I suppose. The first is that, as we said, this is you are not alone. And this is way more common than you ever imagined that it was. Um, so just take a little bit of comfort in that first of all, and therefore lots of people have kind of charted a journey through this, and there are lots of kind of success stories that
Yeah.
as a result. I think that I'm sure there are other groups as well, but We Thrive, I definitely would say, definitely go to that website and definitely, call in. You don't have to say anything. You know, if you just want to listen, that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. But you will find other people there whose experiences will parallel yours, and there are things that you can learn from that will kind of help you along that journey. I think the last thing I would say is just to reflect on this term that absolutely terrified us. Two words: rock bottom.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that what you hear from people is that, well, as you're going through this, and it's, you're taking steps, you're rationalizing it. You're rationalizing it with the young person, yet still they seem to do these irrational things. um, then what the kind of what is said by people is that, yeah, well, he or she is not going to change until they've hit rock bottom. And that, to me and to my wife certainly, that immediately conjures up that same image of, you're propped up in a doorway in the center of town,
Yeah.
wrappers around you and empty bottles and so on, and you're homeless, and and that's you're almost literally in the gutter. And then
Yeah.
so that's sort of the image that
Yeah.
you have. But that I think I don't know if there is another in your circles, Dave. I don't know if there is a synonym for rock bottom that doesn't conjure up those things. But
I'll just say what comes up for me just quickly is emotional fallout. You're emotionally bankrupt. You're spiritually bankrupt. I don't know.
yeah,
I get it. There's a lot of stigma attached
there's
to
a
it.
lot of there's a lot of stigma attached to that too, and it does come up a lot. But and I think this is something that I think I heard you express it this way, Dave, in a previous meeting or something. That there's this like balance. You picture these scales, and what you're looking to do is tip the balance in favor of wanting to change rather than to wanting to continue.
Mm,
And you've got to think about those things that will have that effect.
mm,
um, for for Jack, there was, and again, I think there'll be lots of things, but there was one particular thing that for him that I think was really meaningful, which was that, I've spoken about those red lines that we had to put together, but all the family members had to do that. So all of his siblings had to write this impact statement basically and state what the kind of red lines were. And at that time, his eldest sibling, his sister, was pregnant and expecting a child. And what basically she said was that, if my red line is that you can't be part of my child's life if you're
mm,
seeming to be a drug user. And I
mm.
think that was for him, that had an impact. And so, I mean, that was kind of one component, but there will be kind of meaningful things, and meaningful relationships that are important, that can be helpful there. But I would also say that as parents, I mean, parents are almost the least likely people to kind of bring about. This is the frustrating thing, that to a child, in any, dealing with addiction aside for a minute, in any aspect of, like in teenage years, the person you're least likely to take the advice of is your parents.
Yeah.
So that there's that kind of inherent challenge in dealing with these kind of behaviors in young people. The people who are most motivated to assist and support and get people out through this are actually potentially the least respected by the person who's actually going through it. And how do you how do you deal with that? So I think that'd be the last thing that I would say in terms of advice is that if you feel that your words are falling on deaf ears, then again that's normal. But that's not an addiction related thing. That's just a parenting,
Yeah.
teenage, young person
Yeah.
relationship dynamic. And for us, we recognize that, and we're fortunate that we could enlist the help of professionals and others to to assist with getting through that and providing advice. And
Yeah.
in this regard, you, Dave, you were instrumental in that. I don't think Jack was particularly inclined to go into a treatment center, and we'd suggest to him that was a good idea, and he sort of went through the motions, but we knew that he didn't think that was he needed that was relevant.
Uh,
And it took an outsider, someone coming in, but an outside, obviously, in your case, Dave, of someone who's actually lived this and has been through it and
mm,
has seen it umpteen times and
mm.
kind of recognizes the patterns. And I think again, sort of I may have used the word final 3 times now, but this is my final point to make, that what we've learned is that for the person going through this, being in situations where they are with others who are going through the same challenges or have been through the same challenges is just is just so powerful.
Mm.
Because they can speak authentically, and you know and cut through the bullshit, basically.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because obviously there isn't, and I think you've used the term, kind of self-delusion that happens, that
Yeah.
I'm not an addict, I'm in control of this, whatever. And those who've been through this and come out the other side know that that is just complete nonsense. And so having those people around, and I think that again, as a you know intuitively as a parent, you think the last kind of people you want your son or daughter who's going through these challenges to hang out with are people who are themselves addicts.
Yeah.
Yet the
Yeah.
irony is that they are almost certainly by far the most will make have the opportunity to make the biggest impact on their
Yeah.
recovery.
Yeah. The irony.
The irony of
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, it's so great what you said. And it's so on point, you know, for any parent listening, for anyone that's just really struggling with this, it's not just me, there's a lot of people out there. There's the term recovery coach, which is quite a well-known term now for people who can reach these people, I always call them sober senseis. Just people that they can say the same thing that you parents have said a million times. They'll say the same thing to them, but it'll just reach them because we're not their parent.
yeah,
And we've got a bit of a car crash story that we can tell them to engage their, imagination and to capture their kind of maybe a bit of inspiration or motivation to actually take a risk and make a change. Because deep down, cut away from all the bullshit, all the BS. Cut all that away. They are scared. They're alone. They're desperate. And especially for young guys, we can't admit that. Can't possibly say we've not got the answers.
yeah,
Um, yeah, well, look, Stuart, you're an inspiration as a parent because, I've had to engage with many, 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 many families along the way. There's plenty of people that are in the solution like yourself, and there's plenty that sort of struggle still, even in the journey of recovery, because they still try to do it on their own. They didn't quite grasp the basic fundamental concept that it's a lot easier to do it with the we. Um,
yeah,
Safety in numbers, man. I've got the evidence, people that connect to community, work, alongside other people, just to allow people into their inner circle, get past the pride and your ego, allow support in, ask for help. It's okay. It's all right not to have all the answers.
Yeah,
There's an outcome that is far greater than the ones that try and do it on their own. That's been my experience, and that's what I see. That's the evidence I've got.
yeah,
So you're an inspiration, Stuart. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and just get real.
not at all. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And anyone that does get on We Thrive, Stuart's on there most of the time if he's not doing other things, whatever that might be. Also, I just want to quickly land on this. The We Thrive, even if someone's a little bit shy or not sure about the space, because it is a big thing going on, it really is. There's some talks on, you can go on onto the website and haven't you got pre-recorded talks
I
on
think
there?
that's right. Yeah, I think yeah.
Yeah.
There's a whole load of resources on their website. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone that's sort of like maybe not sure, because it is scary,
Hmm.
um, just go and be a secret squirrel. Just get online and have a look at the website, have a little rummage around and look at what's on there and, maybe listen to some of the talks because they have many people sharing their experience on there. It's really good resource.
Yep, it is.
Right on. Okay, Stuart. It's New Year's Eve as we record this.
It is.
Are you doing anything?
It's a quiet one with some friends.
Excellent. Good. I'm sure Jack's doing a very quiet, humble, serene New Year's Eve.
Hopefully, it is.
He will be. He will be. Okay. Well, look, all the best for 2026,
Yeah.
and
Same to you.
I'll catch you soon.
All right. Take care. Thanks for
See
that,
you
Dave.
later. Bye bye.